Well, good morning, everybody. I'm John Giardinelli. I'm here with Cody Bellmeyer, and this is a special edition of John's Rants. This is not like what we've been doing in the last couple of months where we've gone live and have questions, but this is a special rant because we have a couple of things that we want to talk to you about that we think are very important. Cody's going to jump in. He's got a couple of things he wants to talk to you about as well. All of you know Cody. He's the attorney that I work with on association and broker supervision and broker risk management matters. And so I'm going to talk to you about a couple of things. First of all, I want to talk to you a little bit about the use of social media, particularly in these times. As most of you know, we've had some very serious and in some ways racially charged issues over the last couple of months. And as a result, everybody is paying a lot closer attention to the language and the use of phrases and words and things of that nature. So I'm going to tell you about a hypothetical. I'm going to change the names, but give you an example of something that happened, a couple of cases that happened recently. First one is be very careful if you're in a position as a leader, a broker, a supervisor, something like that, of the words you use in your general comments on social media. In this particular case, a person made a comment about a past public leader, and he used a phrase that related to the person's religion. As a result, there was a tremendous pushback, and a lot of people were offended and got into trouble. So be careful, even if it's just your social media, you know, a comment on Facebook, a comment on Twitter, a comment on any of the social media sites, that you stay away from issues of race and religion and ethnicity, particularly if you're identifying yourself in any capacity in the real estate industry. Secondly, be very, very careful in your comments if it's related to a real estate transaction. Because if that's the case, then both NAR and CAR have taken the position it could be an ethical issue. You could be in violation of Article 10 of the Code of Ethics because your business practices may have racial overtones or religious or sexual orientation overtones. So you need to be very careful about your choice of language. Next, I have a client that is part of one of these Facebook groups. And the Facebook groups in many ways are very good. The trouble with the Facebook groups, obviously, is that sometimes they end up promoting certain kinds of problems. One problem is in this particular Facebook group, there was another person out there who the group decided they didn't like, and they started talking about that person on their Facebook group in a very derogatory manner. As a result, that person was able to find out about it, got wind of it, was able to get copies of all of the correspondence that had been placed on these closed Facebook accounts, and now you have threatened litigation over the defamatory statements of that group about that person. And so you end up not only with civil issues, and Cody was kind enough to send me the jury instruction, and it's pretty clear based on those instructions that there could be some significant issues. But you also, if it's about another real estate professional, you also have ethical issues. You have Article 15, which says you will not disparage another real estate professional knowingly or negligently. You also have Article 3. If it's a racial kind of an issue, there's a provision in Article 3 that talks about your unwillingness to work with brokers based on their color, creed, ethnicity, things like that. Then, of course, keeping in mind that Facebook is a portion of your advertising, so you always have an advertising issue. And then lastly, of course, Article 10, which is the non-discrimination article. So be careful about the things you say on Facebook. I read Facebook periodically. I have about 1,000 friends, most of whom I've never met. And it's amazing to me the things that people say on social media. I personally only made 1 or 2 comments. myself. So if you go to my Facebook site, it's really boring, unless you want to see my dog or my wife or my kids, and then it's very exciting. But the reality is that people are making a lot of social commentary on Facebook, and I believe that's a mistake, particularly if you identify yourself as a realtor. You're still entitled to free speech, but you got to be careful nowadays about that free speech. Cody, I guess the best way that I've heard it described is by our friend at the Department of Fair Housing, where he said, if you're using the characteristics of the person that relate to their protected category, such as the person's color or their religion or their gender identification or something of that nature, that's probably a mistake. And if you use it in the context of a real estate issue, it's probably a violation of the law and possibly can get you into trouble. Any comments on that, Cody?
Yeah, and I think our friend of the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, people tend to forget the employment part, but I think they had a very good point in that. I think that's a very good kind of rule of thumb. But one thing that's important, which the Department of Fair Housing also emphasizes, is that there's vicarious liability here, and I think that's important to keep in mind. Is sometimes these a broker can be liable for the employee's comments, for the agent's discriminatory comments, regardless of if they have knowledge. And they made that very clear even in a presentation earlier this year, which we attended. And so it's important to keep in mind, not only from an individual perspective, but I think for a broker to establish some policies about social media and how their agents are representing the brokerage.
Right. And for you brokers, that's a critically important point. In fact, if you look at Regulation 2725, it talks about A through G, those things that you are specifically responsible to supervise, and discrimination laws is specifically called out in the Department of Real Estate's rules and regulations for broker supervision. So Cody makes a great point. You've really got to be careful about that. So again, if you get involved in some type of a situation like this, you could be in trouble with the Department of Fair Housing. They have, again, I know it's fair housing and employment. I don't care about the employment part. I only care about the housing part. But there's a lot of rules over there. There's 50 pages of regulation, and as Cody mentioned, some of those regulations create vicarious liability for you and for your clients and or your owners if you're in a property management situation. We also have civil remedies if you defame somebody. And those remedies can be very, very severe, particularly if you're defaming somebody in a business context, because that's called disparagement. And if you do that, it's presumed that you've damaged them. So it's a much different scenario than a regular defamation case where somebody actually has to prove that they've been financially damaged. And then, of course, you've got the Code of Ethics. And remember that in the Code of Ethics, if you discriminate or are accused and found guilty of discrimination, that is automatically reported by the board, every board in the United States of America, to the governing body, which in this case would be the Department of Real Estate. So there's nothing wrong with Facebook groups. There's nothing wrong with Twitter, although we do know people that get in a lot of trouble for their Twitter accounts. There's nothing wrong with social media. It's a great form of advertising, but you've got to be careful that you keep it to advertising about the property and the financial conditions surrounding the purchase and or rental of the property. Stay away from personal characteristics. One of the things that came up, Cody, recently are these letters that you're asked to write sometimes, right? The buyer wants to write a letter to the seller, and you need to have policies in effect, because sometimes if those letters have photographs, if you write a letter, the person may have something in mind that could create some kind of a racial or ethnic or religious kind of an implication. So you want to be really, really cautious about writing letters on behalf of a client, and you might want to have a policy. I know one realtor who's a leader in her board that discourages her clients from writing letters and does not participate. But you've got to have a policy in effect for that. The other thing that I have a concern about, Cody, with the Facebook groups is bad advice. We were talking earlier this morning that both Cody and I, when we were in law school, we were in study groups, which is, at least in my time, during the covered wagon era, that was basically our social media. We didn't have all the stuff that you kids have today. But here's the problem with a group, is that if someone gets it wrong but sounds reasonable and knowledgeable, what you've just done is you've created in that group a wrong approach to an issue. And I've seen many, many times realtors and others get it wrong. They misunderstood the rule. They misinterpreted the rule. They didn't understand the rule fully because of other aspects. And then they pass that on in the group, and everybody goes, oh, okay, that's the way I'll handle that at my office from now on. And suddenly you end up with a problem because the group started from a bad position, not intentionally. Nobody did it purposefully. But what ends up happening is you spread the incorrect information, and that then affects not just your office, but could affect other offices as well. Any comment on that, Cody?
No, I think that's spot on. I think it's important to keep those in mind, but at the same time, it's important to remember, kind of reaching back to the topic of social media. Article 12, when you're staring at it in a professional standards standpoint, doesn't just apply to advertising and marketing, but it expressly applies to other communications, other representations, and that's further extended by Article or Standard of Practice 12.8, which is aimed at your websites, which is aimed at those types of online communications. And so it's important to remember that duty of honesty and truthfulness in your real estate transactions does expand to some of those communications.
And the problem, of course, is once you put it in writing, the smoking gun now exists.
Exactly.
Right? And so while I'm not suggesting that you verbally do things wrong, the fact of the matter is once you put something on social media of any type, once you put something in writing, you've now created a permanent record of whatever you said incorrectly. The other thing is, keep in mind, as Cody mentioned, the standards of practice in Article 15, there is a specific provision in Article 15 that says if you talk disparagingly, defaming some other real estate professional, and you do it on social media, that is specifically provided for in the Code of Ethics. So enough said about that. A lot of stuff going on right now in that regard. Your association is constantly trying to keep you guys up to date. Now, I don't have all the details yet, but your CEO, Laura Halverson, is putting together a pretty impressive symposium on September the 10th, I believe it is, at 10 o'clock, and it's going to include a speaker from the Department of Fair Housing and Employment, the attorney for that group, a speaker dealing with the position of organized real estate regarding all of the issues we've just talked about, discrimination, diversity, and it's going to be live, so it'll give you an opportunity to ask questions as well as to hear. Cody and I will talk about some cases that we've seen, some specific examples, but really you want to tune in to listen to these two other experts. More information will follow. Laura will get everything out. But that is, again, September the 10th. It's at 10 a.m. to noon, live. It'll be taped, but you can't ask questions on tape. By the way, it's not even called tape anymore, is it? Whatever it's called, recording, and you will be able to ask any question you want. A couple of other things going on. Cody wrote an article that we're going to send over to the association in a couple of days. I've edited it, but we've got a couple of things I've got to check on. Right now, your professional standards administrator has been reading about and hearing about and getting calls about all kinds of problems with rental properties and fraud relating to Craigslist. So we've written an article, a couple of tips, but keep in mind, if you've got a rental and you've put it in the MLS, you might want to think about putting a sign in that property, making it clear that you're the rental agent, because what these guys are doing, is they're seeing your listings, then they're putting it into Craigslist as their listing. They're getting a deposit. In some cases, they're even moving people in, and now you've got a situation at the least where you've got a victim who thinks they've just rented an apartment in good faith, or a house or some other rental unit. They paid their deposit. They think they have rights to move in, and all of a sudden you've either got a very, very unhappy victim, or you've got a very, very unhappy holdover type tenant, fraudulent tenant, and it's through no fault of theirs. And a lot of times the victims are elderly. The victims sometimes are people that maybe are immigrants, don't speak the language and don't understand what just happened to them. And of course, the owners themselves who are now stuck in a situation. So these are real serious. It's happening all over the place, and it's reached, I believe, very serious proportion because everybody's doing real estate online right now. So this is a golden opportunity for the bad guys to take advantage of a situation where the computer has become the marketplace for many, many people. So be very, very careful about that. Take a look at the article, and we'll get that out to you early next week. And it's a special courtside specifically for this particular subject. There's a bunch of legislation that's pending, a couple of issues. The good news is the legislature is on hiatus right now. And the leadership of both houses have asked that members pull their bills unless it's absolutely necessary, because they're not going to be able to get to everything because they're not going to be able to meet. And so, but there are a couple of bills that are working their way through the legislature. One is AB 1436. That is a bill that will deal with the issue of unpaid rent, rent moratorium or eviction moratoriums and the like. It's not very friendly to landlords. In fact, it's not friendly at all to landlords. It's going to create a lot of problems for landlords, and it's already passed through the Assembly. It is now sitting in the Senate Judiciary Committee, as is AB 1703. AB 1703 has already been through the House. It is now, through the Assembly. It is now in the State Senate, and it is a bill that will require, under the circumstances, that will, pardon me, that we'll write about once we know a little bit more about the bill. But it's a bill that will create a right of first refusal for tenants. So if I'm renting a certain type of property that's described in the, not going to be all property, not going to be high-end stuff, but if I'm renting an affordable property, I'm going to be given the right by statute to have a right to buy that property. And before the landlord can put it on the market, he's going to have to offer it to the tenant and or to certain tenant groups. It's going to delay the process. It's going to create a lot of legal issues. Landlords are going to have to sign declarations under penalty of perjury if the bill passes. But it's made it all the way to the Judiciary Committee. So right now they're trying to figure out if it's legal. That's the purpose of the Judiciary Committee. So that's happening. So I think we've used up our rant time. Cody, do you have anything else you wanted to mention? I know that you and I have talked about a lot of stuff recently.
Yeah, we're consistently talking about stuff, and I would encourage, it's kind of becoming my mantra at this point, is to just encourage people to keep an eye on developing laws, developing orders, developing local orders. Tri-County is doing a phenomenal job at doing that. A lot of the associations are. PWR is doing a great job at that. And just go to the websites, go to CAR. A lot of just really great information is out there for members right now. And I would encourage you to just go read, spend 10 minutes even. If it's 10 minutes a day, you'll catch up eventually, and you'll keep up to date on the current things within your guys' profession right now, which continue to develop.
One of the things you may want to do is target minimally, and this is by no means what you should be doing, but at least minimally for those of you that watch this and don't give it the full effort. Minimally, every Tuesday, CAR publishes a summary of the week on all these issues. Yesterday, or what's today? Today's Thursday, sorry. We're taping this on a Thursday. On Tuesday, they put an article in talking about the passing of one of the civil rights leaders, Mr. Lewis. They also talked about and put a link to the new Showing frequently asked questionnaire. and they just do stuff like that every week. So minimally, you should do that. But I agree with Cody. I go to CAR's website on almost a daily basis. You're members of Tri-Counties, so Tri-Counties, frankly, it's all you need to do. Go to the Tri-Counties website. There's links. The government affairs director is putting stuff on there for you on the new legislation. We'll be putting articles on there for you. Laura's putting links on there for you. It's just a lot of stuff, a lot of classes, a lot of things going on. So that's probably your best place to start, is your association's website. All right, I think for today, that's it. Keep an eye out for future rants and future developments. And I think, unless you have something else to say, Cody, we'll say goodbye to everybody.
No, I'm good. I appreciate the time and I appreciate being invited on. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, have you stopped the recording?
I am now.
Uh-oh. So let me know about Mr. John.